Never know how strong you are if you refuse now to trust God by faith. If you and I acquiesce, surrender, or now get out of the way and allow somebody else to do what God has called us to do, then how can I know, amen, that I'm capable? How do I know that God is living inside of me? How do I know that I can overcome? How do I know that I'm healed? How do I know I'm forgiven? How do I know that I have wisdom or I can be patient? If in the face of opposition, I make a decision now, right? Or I make an excuse on why I can't. And in Nehemiah 6:3, he recognizes that the enemy is trying to now distract him from his focus. And when the enemy can't distract you, then the enemy tries to intimidate. So when you read the rest of Nehemiah chapter 6, then the enemy then sends a letter beginning at verse 4. The enemy sends a letter to Nehemiah and said, look, this is what I'm getting ready to write back home to the king. I'm getting ready to go back and tell the king that now you are planning a coup. That the only reason why you came here to rebuild this wall was to make yourself a king. And that the prophetic word that you were standing on, you hired those prophets. Okay, you hired those people, and now they're rebuilding this wall. They're going to make you king, and then you're going to rebel against the king. And he wrote this down in a letter, and then he says, and Geshem is going to co-sign. So Geshem was also an official. So he's trying to intimidate, right? This opposition. If I can't distract you, and distract your focus, then now I try to intimidate you to move you off your position of strength. Because as long as you are in the will of God, you're in the safest place. There is no other place safer than in the will of God. The safest place is in the eye of a hurricane, right? Is in that eye of the hurricane where the storm, the winds are blowing all around you, right? Debris, lightning, all of these things. But in the eye, there's peace. And when, even though you're facing opposition, if you remain steadfast and focused, then now you're able to overcome. Amen. And so you won't shrink, amen, from your assignment. And so as God has commanded Joshua, and he tells Joshua, Joshua, I will be with you. So be strong and courageous. That is what Nehemiah has to learn. That you need to be strong and courageous. But also, this is the second thing I want you to remember. The mere presence of opposition against your assignment is an indication that you're moving in the right direction. If the enemy is opposing you, it's because you're doing that which pleases God. If the enemy is coming up against you and the intensity, right, it begins to now get stronger and stronger, that lets you know that the enemy is afraid. Amen. That if you overcome, he's afraid of your destiny. He's afraid of your purpose. He's afraid of your assignment. And so therefore, don't shrink back. Amen. Begin to rejoice. Amen. That's why James says, count it all joy when we fall into diverse trials, right? He says, because now you understand that the opposition that's coming against you and the opposition that's coming against me is a sign that you and I are in the will of God. That's why the devil attacked Jesus, right, when he thought Jesus was at his most vulnerable point. Right, when Jesus was in the wilderness for those 40 days and 40 nights, that the enemy came now. Why? Because he was afraid of Jesus' assignment. And so he tried to distract Jesus, right? Cause Jesus to lose his focus. Then he tried to intimidate. Oh, I can give you this. No, you can't give me that. Right? We live by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Amen. So remember, your assignment requires focus. It requires boldness and strength. Amen. Your assignment, watch this, God also gives you gifts, burdens, and passions. Those all work together to help you and I remain on course. Secondly, remember this, that the intensity of your opposition is a reminder to you and to me that we're on the right path. Amen. So we can do what God has called us to do. We can walk in God's purpose. We can overcome. And then as Paul tells us, right, in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, Paul says, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his power. Be strong in the Lord. See, because Nehemiah understood that this was God's assignment. This was God's purpose. And God was the one opening doors. God gave him this assignment. God gave him this power. Amen. God gave him this purpose. And so as long as he stood in the strength of God, then now he can overcome and resist any opposition. He didn't lose focus. He wasn't distracted. He wasn't intimidated by the enemy. But whenever the enemy faced him, he had a spirit that would discern. He had a holy boldness that he would overcome and keep moving forward. It is God's assistance that overcomes resistance. God's assistance overcomes resistance. So that's our lesson tonight. That's what I want you to remember in the face of opposition, that God's assistance overcomes, right, the enemy's resistance. Amen. So I want you to join me now in our Zoom where we can have a discussion about this lesson. I pray, amen, that some questions were invoked. I pray that we can enter into a very spirited dialogue, amen, because you'll never know how strong, how wise, right, and how patient you are, amen, until you are confronted by opposition and you walk by faith and not by sight. All right. So in a few moments at 6:35,